Good afternoon, class. I know your final exam is fast approaching, and thought I'd spend just a few minutes talking about some concepts that you probably need to spend some time over the next, I don't know, couple of days as you study for the final. And one of the first things I want to talk about is it's just coding, just in general, healthcare coding. And again, healthcare coding was developed, let's say, to provide consistency, provide definition around services, to provide reimbursement. So, consistent definitions, consistent nomenclature, consistent reimbursement, consistency when it comes to research and determining evidence-based treatment protocols. A lot of really good, a lot of excellent rationale for developing coding systems. And some coding systems are managed by CMS, some by AMA, American Hospital Association has some inputs, several other government agencies. I mean, CMS is part of Health and Human Services. So a lot of people have their kind of finger in the pie. World Health Organization does too. They're right in the middle of the ICD-9. At least now it's 11. I guess we're getting close to ICD-12. But well, let's just talk for a few minutes about just HCPC codes, and that's Healthcare Common Procedure Coding System, HCPCS. You hear people in the industry talk about, yeah, well, we've been doing some research and we think these HCPC codes are out of date, or we've been doing some research and these HCPC codes are being overutilized and we think they're being fraudulently billed. Well, HCPC codes tell you not only what the provider did, but to tell you what the provider used. So level 1 HCPC code, it's a CPT code. It's a current procedure terminology, CPT code. And again, in the industry, you hardly ever hear anybody say level 1 HCPC code. They just jump right to CPT codes. And those are 5-character, usually 5-digit. Occasionally you'll see some that start with the letter, but they're mostly, I want to say, test CPT codes, and maybe the government's running some tests on. And a lot of those, I think, will start with the letter G. G is in George. So CMS is thinking about implementing them, and CMS comes out at least with the initial changes on January the 1st every year. They can make some changes, quarterly changes that go along, but that initial change from year to year comes out January 1st. And the CPT codes tell you what the provider did. The level 2 HCPC codes, and again, most people in the industry just say, well, HCPC. And that's what the provider used. Usually talk about medical devices, supplies, transportation, ambulance, air ambulance, all of those are going to be billed with HCPC codes. Motorized wheelchairs, prosthetics and orthotics. We're going to bill all of those with HCPC codes. So again, HCPC codes, level 1 is CPT, level 2 is just HCPC codes. Level 1 tells you what the provider did. Level 2 tells you what the provider uses. And if we go back to our ethical dilemma in healthcare, especially in the non-institutional environment, this is where providers are going to really play around with the information on the CPT codes and on the HCPC codes. And if you've ever worked for a health plan or ever been involved in doing any kind of analytical work, or if you were working for a payment integrity team, or even working for network management, medical management, you're going to be intimately familiar with CPT codes and HCPC codes. You're going to have an idea of what to look for. Then we've got, and again, it's World Health Organization. They typically manage the ICD-11, and there's a CM version, and there's an ICD-11 PCS version. So the CM version is clinical modification, and that tells you why a provider did what they did. When I say did what they did, what services they provided, and what supplies they used. So HCPC tells you what they did, what they used. ICD 11 codes tell you why they did it. It'll tell you, it'll give you information about, did the patient have pneumonia? Did the patient have the flu? Did the patient have COVID? It talks about the why that's driving the service that you receive from the healthcare provider. And then the PCS part of the ICD-11, it's the procedure coding system, and it's only going to show up on a institution or facility claim or a hospital claim. It's for facility-based procedures. Surgical procedures in the emergency room, surgical procedures in the operating suite. So those claims will come through on a facility-based claim. Those PCS, ICD-11 PCS codes will come through on a facility-based or an institution-based claim, so it's going to come on the UB04. You're not going to see on the HCFA 1500, you'll see the place on the HCFA 1500 for the ICD-11 CM codes. You just won't see a place on there for the ICD-11 PCS codes. On the UB04, you're going to see places for the CM codes and the PCS codes. Then we talked a few minutes about modifiers. You can have modifiers associated with CPT codes or associated with HCPC codes, either one. They're two-digit indicators. And I'll just use, radiology services. So let's say it's a radiology service in the hospital. You go into the emergency room and they need you maybe blown out knee. So they need some type of radiology film taken. And if it's the technical component of that radiology film, so if it's the person taking the picture, that radiology code, and the radiology code is like the 70,000 series of the CPT codes, it's going to have a modifier TC, Tom Charlie, technical component. That's what the TC stands for. If you have a radiologist that's reading that film, it's going to have a modifier of 26, which means a professional component. And that means, you've got a radiologist reading it and billing for it. You've got a hospital that's taking the film and getting paid for it. Or if it's blank, if that modifier is blank, it means the physician was on staff at the hospital and the hospital is going to get the whole 9 yards. So that's what modifiers are. Revenue codes, they show up on a UB04. They're in Field Locator 42. And they are the they are the drivers of revenues. You can also have in Field Locator 44, you can have CPT HCPC codes. So let's say that your revenue, it's if I'm not mistaken, the revenue code for emergency room is 0450. So that's like your emergency room suite, I think, if I remember correctly. So that's your revenue code for the emergency room. So that revenue code is going to tell you where or what type of services were provided in that facility or in that institution. So you've got something in the revenue code, but over here it's a Field Locator 42, and then over here on Field Locator 44, you could have a CPT code. You could have a surgical procedure that was performed in the emergency room. You could have a radiology procedure tied to that. So there's combinations. You can see combinations of revenue codes and CPT and HCPC codes on that UB04 claim form. And then finally, we're going to talk about DRGs and MDCs. DRGs are prospective payment systems for hospitals and inpatient services. Hospitals, inpatient services can be paid on bill charges, be paid a per diem rate, be paid a case rate, be paid on DRG. A lot of different reimbursement methodologies, but a lot of health plans are moving to DRGs because it's just cleaner for everybody involved, and it's just much more consistent. And then those DRGs are based in, they're allocated to 26 major diagnostic categories. And those 26 major diagnostic categories are also broken into medical and surgical. Remember when I talked about the ICD-11 PCS codes? If the claim has one of those PCS codes on it, it bumps it from a medical claim or a medical DRG or a medical MDC down to a surgical. So that kind of ties it all together where we're talking about codes, and it's the codes and the combinations of those codes and how they appear either on the 1500 or the UB04 that enables a healthcare provider to maximize their revenue, to improve that revenue stream. On the DRG side of the house, is called DRG creep. If it's on the non-institutional side, you're usually looking at upcoding and unbundling and billing for services not provided. Also on the hospital side, you got to be really careful about itemized bills. So you have to look at the itemized bills that drive all of these revenue codes, because on the claim, the revenue code, it is summarized. Everything that was provided in the emergency room may be summarized to one line, to that 0450. But if you looked at the itemized bill, there could be several pages in there of information that was provided that drove it to that 450. And it's the ability of providers to play around with these codes and to play around with the information on the CMS 1500 or the UB04 that enables them to optimize their revenue, to game the system. Remember, opportunity cost, self-interest, which is optimization, decisions at the margin. Remember those three. Those are going to drive a lot of the ethical issues that we have in the healthcare environment. And again, when we just quickly review the two types of billing forms, you've got a CMS 1500, or it used to be called the HCFA 1500. I still refer to it as the HCFA 1500. I catch myself a lot of times. If you're talking to individuals in the healthcare environment and they talk about the HCFA 1500, you know they're kind of the old timers in there, because that's what they kind of grew up with, the HCFA 1500. On the UB04, it used to be called when I first started healthcare, it was the UB92. Changed to UB04. And so you can kind of identify again, how long people have been working in the healthcare environment, especially on the claims side, based on the terminology they use. And as we just talked about on the codes, on the HCMA 1500, you can see CPT codes, you can see HCPC codes, you can see ICD-11 codes, you can see modifiers. If you're looking at the UB04, you've got potential CPT and HCPC codes in Field Locator 44. You can see modifiers in Field Locator maybe 46, I can't remember exactly. You've got the ICD-11 codes, there's space for them down toward the bottom. You've got ICD-11 PCS codes, again, space down toward, I think the diagnosis may be on the left, and then the CM on the left, and maybe the PCS on the right. And you've got revenue codes. You're going to find those in Field Locator 42. So information in those codes and in those billing forms are going to drive the potential ability for a healthcare provider to game the system, drive additional revenue, without really providing any additional services. And again, when you're talking about non-institution, you're talking about upcoding, unbundling, billing for services that were never provided. If you're talking about the institution, on the institutional side, on that UB04, you're talking about DRG creep, you're talking about itemized bill reviews, playing around with the revenue codes. And again, non-provision of services, because the only way you can tell whether the services were provided or not, you have to get that itemized bill, and you may be going through page after page on line items. But that's why you have payment integrity. That's why, people driving pavement integrity are called the watchdogs. It's the watchdogs of the health plans because they're ensuring that those claims are paying accurately as frequently as possible. When we talk about the life of a claim, there are basically three phases. You've got the pre-adjudication phase, you've got the adjudication phase, and you got the post-adjudication phase. The pre-adjudication phase, to me, if you're a patient, the pre-adjudication of a adjudicated claim starts the day that you sign up for that health plan or that benefit plan. Typically, you sign up when you become employed. If you've been employed for a number of years, you're selecting your benefit plans back here in October, November, December, and open enrollment, and they become effective January the 1st. You're providing information, age, sex, driver's license information. Are you covered by other health plans? When you go in, and so that's kind of the information used there. It's passed on to the health plan. The health plan starts building their enrollment files based on this information, this self-reported information that you, or that me, the member, has provided to the health plan when I take that benefit plan that my employer group has purchased for me. I'm paying a premium out of my paycheck. Some employers take it once a month. Some employers take it every pay period, but I'm paying for it. When I go to see a healthcare provider, depending on what kind of plan it is, I'm providing similar information to my healthcare provider. All of the demographic information, am I covered by another health plan? Is the reason for my visit, is it, did you have an accident at work? Is it the result of a motor vehicle accident? Is it subrogatable accident? You just slip and fall at Walmart? Have you had a hip replacement and all of a sudden you're having problems? So does that fall kind of in that mass tort kind of area? And you as a patient, again, are providing information to the provider so the provider can theoretically not only develop your treatment plan, but to accurately fill out that claim that they're going to submit to the health plan for payment. All in the pre-adjudication phase. So you go in, you talk to your provider, they develop a health plan. Provider says, yeah, you got to have an x-ray, you need some lab work done. Your foot's bothering you, your ankle's bothering you, I'm gonna give you a walking boot to me. There's a lot of stuff that the provider can prescribe while you're there. Then the provider takes that information, gives it to their billing office, and their billing office goes about populating. And if it's a non-institutional provider, they're like, say, primary care doctor or provider, whatever, they're going to start populating that HCFA 1500 to submit to the health plan. Once that claim is submitted and the health plan reviews it and says, yep, it's a clean claim, everything's been filled out as accurately as we know that it's filled out, then it flipped from the pre-adjudication phase to the adjudication phase. And at that point, that claim starts down through the adjudication system. It's gone to enrollment, and they're checking to make sure little Johnny's, and entitled to the benefit plan. It's checking to see if they have a record on file that, Mrs. Smith was in an automobile accident. Did she get hurt at work? Is it a subrogatable claim where she fell at Walmart? Trying to figure out who is the responsible party. Does Mrs. Smith, should it be paid by her insurance company, or does Mr. Smith have a health plan that maybe Mrs. Smith should be paid according to? So coordination of benefits, other party liability, all of those things are checked. Medical management's looking to say, hey, Ms. Smith didn't have a referral for that doctor's visit, so we may not be able to pay for that doctor's visit. You're also looking at network management. They've negotiated the rates. And so Ms. Smith went to see Dr. Zielinski. And so while she's in to see Dr. Zielinski's got a fee schedule that he's going to be paid for. And if it was a A medium level office visit, if the CPT code is a 99213 for medium office visit, the system checked and said, oh, yeah, there's Dr. Zelinsky, and we're going to pay $60 for that office visit. So all of this is taking place as that claim goes down through the adjudication phase. It's also going through the clinical editor that's looking at that claim and saying, yeah, this Zelinsky, this Dr. Zelinsky said he's a slick dude. He's not only billed for a normal, medium office visit, but he's trying to bill for some extra services that should have been included in that medium office visit. So we're going to deny those lines. We're not going to pay Zelinsky. He's just he's a slick card. We're going to we're not going to pay him on this one, we're going to put him on a pen status, and we're going to start reviewing a bunch of his claims as they come through. Not only the subsequent claims that come through, we're going to go back and look at him for the last year or two and see how many times he's been trying to circumvent the system. So all of this is happening in the adjudication phase. And then it gets down to the bottom. Everything's been adjudicated. The claim's been paid. At that point, an electronic payment, an ACH payment goes out to Zelinsky. And at that point, the adjudication phase is done. And then we fall into the post-adjudication phase. And the post-adjudication phase is where most of the audits occur, where most of the fraud, waste, and abuse activity occurs. It's where most of the subrogation occurs, most of the subrogatable type things. Going back and tying a ribbon on the workers' comp and the motor vehicle accidents and mass tort. Is this a hip issue that's got a defective hip, and we're going back and sue, the health plan's going to go back and sue the company that provided that hip. So all of this is taking place in the post-adjudication phase. A lot of interaction between the health plan and the members, especially if they catch the members providing false information, and that happens a lot. Or between the health plan and the providers, where they catch Dr. Zelinsky, being a bad boy and, or being a bad actor, and he's submitting these claims, these bogus claims, billing for bogus services. All of that takes place in that post-adjudication phase. And then don't ever forget data security. And that's a huge issue. And again, we go back to HIPAA. It's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. I think it was implemented in 1966, if I remember the date right. That it's a huge issue, not only on the health plan side, but on the provider side. I mean, you think of the number of people. So you go in to see your primary care doctor. You think of the number of people in that office that have access, Social Security number, home address, ID number for your health plan, medical information about you, age information. You think of all of the people in that doctor's office that have access to that information that could either allow a breach of that system or downloading the information, taking it home with them and selling it. You don't know what's going on in that provider's office. Same thing on the health plan side. Think of all of the information on that in that health plan: payment integrity, internal audit, network management, medical management, legal, risk management, all of those individuals that have access to your information. And you hope that on the health plan side, that they've got firewalls and they've got data security and they've got everything wrapped up tight so that nobody's breaching that, and they're ensuring that nobody is actually downloading that information and trying to sell it out on the open market. Excuse me. And then lastly, not only do you have breaches, but you're, both on the provider side and on the health plan side, you're working with third-party vendors. You're providing third-party vendors, whether you're on the provider side or the health plan side, providing them claims files, you're providing them membership files, you're providing them provider files. I mean, all of the information flowing back and forth to these vendors that are trying to help providers either on the payment integrity side, I'm sorry, on the health plan on the payment integrity side, or on the providers on the revenue cycle management side. Payment integrity, revenue cycle management, and all health plans and providers are using vendors to help them because there's not enough resources to go around. There's not enough infrastructure either on most health plan side or most provider sides to do everything themselves. And it's just HIPAA is in the business of trying to manage, trying to provide the policies and procedures and protocol available for the transfer of information from the employer group to the health plan to the provider back to the health plan again back out to the provider. So think of all of the data transfers, direct ones, and then you've got all these collateral data transfers going on. It's actually a wonder that that things aren't in worse shape than they are. I can remember being at, we talk about data transfer and things. I can remember being at Ohio State in graduate school, and I worked the weekends in medical records at the Ohio State Hospital. And I worked the night shift. I worked from 11 to 7 Friday night. I worked from 11 to 7 Saturday night. And I worked from 11 to 7 on Sunday night. Then I just, leave the hospital and go to school on Monday morning. But working in medical records, they had a bank vault in the hospital where they had stored a lot of sensitive information. I can remember everybody talked about it, had all of the healthcare records of Woody Hayes when he was football coach at Ohio State. Just the governor of Ohio, they had his medical records. They had DA and the president of the university. They had all of these influential or legendary individuals. They had all their medical records stored in this bank vault, and they also had, if there was ever an issue within any of the university healthcare system that might end up in some kind of legal action, and that's where those records went just automatically. And it was definitely not unusual for maybe not prosecutors, but lawyers to get a subpoena, or what appeared to be a subpoena, and they love to come to medical records at about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning, Sunday morning, and Monday morning, because they thought, especially Saturday and Sunday, they thought that they could catch us not paying attention and just said, "Oh yeah, here the records, not a problem." And I turned many of them down. I'd say, I'd look at it, and I didn't know whether it was it was hard for me to tell on some of those documents whether it was a binding subpoena or not. And it was like, director of medical records at that point, vice president, I said, she'll be in on Monday morning, 8 o'clock. Best thing, if you want those records, just come back and touch base with her at 8 o'clock. I'm sure she'll be happy to give them to you, but it's not happening with me. I don't have that authority to give you those records. And they would argue I've been threatened by individuals, take me to jail and lock me up. And I said, okay, well, whatever. You want to take me to jail, go for it. But, it happened a lot. And that you have different kinds of individuals trying to breach systems and steal information that they can get from healthcare records. And then lastly, we talk about, payment integrity. And, we're I always consider the watchdogs for the health, make sure the claims are adjudicating correctly and everything's running as it should be. And I had a centralized payment integrity team at Blue Cross Blue Shield, and under kind of the fraud, waste, and abuse umbrella, again, we were in that bunch or trying to attack that 25% of waste and abuse. I had a revenue integrity unit that mostly contract compliance, DRG validation, itemized bill review, data mining, and SIU, Special Investigations Unit, which was the group that went after the fraudulent guys, and we put several in jail over the years. And then I had a data governance, which did, code editing. So that was one shop. I had other party liability, which they focused on coordination of benefits, other health insurance, motor vehicle accidents, workers' comp, subrogation, mass tort, credit balance. That all fell under other party liability. And with the team on other party liability, not only were they doing analytical work, but they were also processing claims. They were also reaching out to patients, reaching out to providers, trying to verify information. They'd see weird things come in on the claims feed, and they'd pin those claims out. They would do the research, and talking about millions of dollars that we were recouping under payment integrity. Also had a medical economics team that did a lot of the analytical work for us, provided us, leads and trying to grab these or trying to get our hands around these fraudulent providers or these providers that were abusing the system. Had an operational metric, and it was like operational metrics and optimization. And in that, I had 3 or 4 people that were Lean Six Sigma certified. They had their black belts in Lean Six Sigma, and they spent their time looking at operational efficiency, trying to figure out from a marginal product of labor, an average product of labor, how we were doing within this payment integrity team. And then the last, I had a vendor partner group that we worked hand in hand with third-party vendors, because we just didn't have the resources. And we would send out to third-party vendors. We would send things like low recovery but high dollar activity, send out services that were really labor intensive, and we just didn't have the, again, when I was directing this payment integrity team, I was focused not only on self-interest, but I was looking at this opportunity cost too. And I was looking at, and also decisions at the margin. I was using all 3 of them, because I was looking at the opportunity cost. What could I take my team and allocate them to do that we got more bang for the buck? And if we had services that I'd shipped from, I would just dump them out to third-party vendor. And then there were certain services you dumped out to third-party vendor that you just didn't have an appetite to do. Our legal department didn't like subrogation or mass tort. So all of that automatically went out to third-party vendors. But at the end of the day, our responsibility was to ensure that those claims were processing accurately. And we were trying to optimize that. That was our goal. How many claims could we process through accurately the first time, preferably? But if we had to go back and claw money back, then we did. So that's kind of wraps it up for our final. I think you should do pretty well on the final. If you have questions, again, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and good luck. Thank you.